Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you're based in the world, and welcome to today's Shufti Pro webinar. We are going to be talking today about video identity, video ident under scrutiny, and really looking at whether your regulatory controls are truly defensible. And as many of you will be aware, we've really moved forward strategically from a regulatory perspective on the expectations of control frameworks. In the past, we can actually accurately say in many instances, if it looked good on paper and if we had very clear policies, procedures, a good solid framework that could be auditable back to the regulations, in many instances, an audit or a regulatory inspection would be passed. That has now transformed as we've moved over the past few years. And going into 2026, even from a FATF perspective, mutual evaluations now are no longer looking at the regulation. We've got that. It's rather, are your frameworks operationally effective and defensible, i.e., can you articulate how your framework is actually mapped back to the risk exposure in your organization and protect your organization based on your risk appetite and regulatory expectations. So in a world of evolving regulation, increasingly sophisticated fraud and growing reliance on automation, the question really is are our identity assurance models truly fit for purpose, which, by the way, is a very difficult sentence to say with a Northern Irish accent, I'll just have you know. So today we're going to be exploring video identity in particular through three lenses. We're going to be looking at regulatory expectations, operational realities, and emerging fraud risks. And our aim is pretty simple. We're going to look to share practical insights on how firms can move from treating video identity as a compliance step to designing it as a defensible, risk-based control. So on that note, I would like to take the opportunity to introduce you to our incredible speakers today. And so without further ado, if I may, and we'll just go around the table here. First, Max Irwin from Shufti, would you please kind of introduce yourself?
Sure. So, yeah, people were probably expecting Roger, which he can make it last minute. So we landed with myself, but my role is VP of Sales, mainly looking after the European region at Shufti. Been here for the last 9 months now, and previously before that, I worked for a company called ID Now. I was there for 5 years, probably one of the leaders in the video ident space within the DACH region, where I was there. So, yeah, and then now, like I said, working with Shufti and looking forward to discussing the subjects in more detail, and obviously good to meet with you guys as well.
Brilliant. And again, thank you, Max, for stepping in for Roger. Thank you very much. Next, we have Thies Bushman. I hope I pronounced your first name correctly there, Thies. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, thank you. My name is Thies. I'm a lawyer by education from Germany. I started my career in gaming and compliance as an operations manager of an ID services provider about more than a decade ago. I spent some time being a consultant. I have been working in the management of a couple of operators, gambling operators, online gambling operators, and now I have become to be a consultant again, and currently I'm serving Chevron Group as the responsible for all international consulting relations. So I have basically seen the topic of video identification in the last 10 to 15 years from all angles.
Amazing, thank you, Thies. And Thies joins us today with his emotional support puppet and stuffed seal. That's a private joke. Anyway. Puppet to the left over his shoulder. And last but absolutely not least, we have joining us the esteemed Alex Wood, who I have the absolute pleasure of knowing as a good friend also. So Alex, would you like to introduce yourself?
Thank you so much, Una. Yeah, nice to be with you all. Well, let me say I'm the person that you understand to be Alex Wood. Of course, in these times, and specifically when we're thinking about identification, that's as good as we can basically get, isn't it? You're the people we understand to be the identity that you're given. But I used to be a criminal. I've for many years was a sort of prolific fraudster. I committed some absolutely horrendous financial offences, and then in recent years I've become a reformed character, and I've sort of become from a poacher to a gamekeeper, if you like, and I now help industry and financial institutions and governments to understand the risks that they face from people like I used to be. And I'm also a part of the BBC Scam Secrets team, which is a consumer program to help the public to understand the risks they face.
You give me an idea there, Alex. Wouldn't that be amazing if I just said, okay, now guys, and we all did like a face-off moment where we all just, like, that's for the next, that would be really cool. We could just finish the webinar there. I wish we thought about that beforehand. But yes, we've got some ideas for the next, that will be the next one. But no, thank you very much, Alex. And you know, this is what we love about today's session. We're bringing real kind of practitioner experience, the challenges in-house, a mindset of an actual fraudster, and how controls can easily be both manipulated and worked around. And obviously we're going to be speaking as well from the vendor perspective. So what are we seeing from a technology development perspective to better support the market? So without further ado, we will start on our questions. I would encourage everybody to ask questions throughout. So if you have any questions at all, they don't even have to be relevant to video identity, just throw them into the chat room and we'll be happy to answer them within reason. Okay, first and foremost, what is video identity in today's control environment? So before we start, to make sure everyone is on a level playing field, and Max, if I could direct this towards you, how do we what is video identity today as a technology, as a regulatory requirement? You know, can you just explain it in a bit more detail so that everybody fully understands what we're speaking to today?
Yeah, so ultimately, video identity, video KYC, video onboarding, whatever you want to call it, it has various different names across different sectors and different use cases, but ultimately it relies on someone onboarding, speaking to an agent, normally via video-based means where they speak to an agent on the other end, verify their identity. There can be several steps depending on regulation. So the use case may be for banking in the DACH region. There will be sometimes sets of questions during that process. They will have to hold up their identity card or passport, whatever that might be. Sometimes show different sides of that. Sometimes show and tilt for hologram checks. So yeah, depending on the use case, there's different parts to the flow. I won't go into great detail, but there's different use cases depending on different regulation. And then I guess the hot topics at the moment is the fact that a lot more people now in this day and age are looking to not have the time restraints. So taking so long to onboard someone via a video call. There's also the element of the cost that comes with that. So there's means why people want to have more automated onboarding rather than kind of a video-based onboarding. So there's some of the questions and, you know, some of the kind of ways that people are reviewing video KYC in this day and age.
And could I just ask you there? I don't want to jump straight into like into the depth of the discussion, but do you want to maybe give a little bit of flavor around the kind of the deep fake aspect before we start going into video identity? What are the major risks that video identity exposes organizations to?
Yeah, I mean, good question. I will say that video ident still brings just as much capabilities to combat deepfakes as some of the AI and automation ways of doing it. So you're still going to have to capture your ID card, and the solutions like ourselves and others in the market can still use AI deepfake detection, things like injection attack detection to pick up on software being used during that capture. So there's still an element of defense like there would be with an automated capture where you're not actually speaking to an agent. I guess what this brings where you are speaking to an agent is the comfort that there's someone on the end of the video call and someone that you can actually talk to and, you know, declare that there's actually someone there, rather than sometimes if you don't have a biometric capture in part of your automated journey, it could be anyone scanning the ID card at the end of the day. So that's ways that people like VideoIdent, because it's speaking to someone and you can prove that there's someone on the end of the call, and also you can video that whole aspect from end to end and capture that. But in the same way, I guess there's, with AI, people can also computer generate, you know, videos of people these days and age, and also combat that. So it's weighing up what you kind of want, and also complying with regulation at the same time. Depends on risk appetite at the end of the day also.
And maybe actually, if we can, Alex, if I can bring you in here.
Yeah.
One of the other kind of key challenges here is around coercion. So even if we do have an actual individual in the video call, there is obviously engineering where criminals coach victims during the call. Could you maybe kind of give us a little bit of flavor around that in terms of how that's done, and maybe some characteristics or key points that people should look out for to identify that? Is that easily detectable, that type of behavior?
Yeah, I mean, and it varies in different parts of the world. So not necessarily in relation to DACH, this example, but in South Africa, for example, some of the banks there are trained, their biometric facial recognition software is trained to recognize evidence of blood on the face, or a black eye, or evidence of somebody in distress. And if they detect that, those characteristics during an onboarding or during an authorization, the software will locate where that phone is and send the police without the person actually having to call the police themselves. So that's really sort of powerful. A very recent example that I became aware of was, and it's quite a complex fraud, this one, where somebody went for a job interview. It was supposed to be at a big bank, and they went to this luxury office in the city and went through several rounds of interviews. And in the final stage of the interview, the recruiter said, right, just record a quick piece to camera, just say who you are, your date of birth, just introduce yourself, just confirm your passport number on this, just so we can ID you, and then say to the CEO why we should hire you. And all of this was captured. It turned out it was a live banking application on the other end, and this person was saying everything to the video that was required to open a bank account or take out a loan. So we're not just dealing with coercion; we're dealing with very, very sophisticated social engineering to get somebody onto video, and get them making those representations down to something like VideoIdent.
Wow, that's incredible. Thies, can you give us any insights from the DACH region about, following on from what Alex has spoken to about technology, identifying these types of, behaviors or patterns, in calls? Are you aware of any of that type of development at the moment? And have you been involved, or have you seen any of this in the market?
I mean, of course, it is not so easy for me to say too precise things about this, because first of all, I'm not a product specialist, and second, of course, all the providers of video identification methods, of course, they will keep their fraud detection measures, they will keep them secret to a certain extent. But I am well aware from my one of my professional duties is that I serve several companies in the DACH markets as well as beyond as an MRO, and so I got to see actually these videos, where people try to, either by social engineering, try to influence someone, or try to influence the video by technical means. And so it is, I can say that this has, since artificial intelligence has become so common, I believe, I mean, all these technologies and all these methods, they were on the table for years, but they were not in a public spot. And I believe even a lot of, let me say, common fraudsters who are not like high-profile career criminals, but just people trying to open a bank account or try to, I don't know, gamble some money with their grandmother's like bank card or something, they were maybe not aware of these methods. But I think it has become a huge problem. There is a lot of things that need to be detected. And what you just said, Alex, I think it's very important that on the one hand, I believe that, as you mentioned, the South African method, yeah, it is very important that technology can focus and can detect inconsistencies. On the other hand, from a regulatory perspective, speaking as a lawyer, especially in Germany, even way more than in DACH markets, in the other DACH markets, so in Austria and Switzerland, it is very important to understand that there is a regulatory element which requires human intervention. So it is necessary that on the other side of the video, as Max mentioned before, there is actually a human being which someone is speaking to. Because, for instance, in Germany, it is online identity verifications. They would work in a way. There is a certain authority, the so-called Kommission für Jugendmedienschutz. I don't ask you to pronounce that, yeah. So, but but they would be regulating all these all the suitable ID methods for the German online world. And if you don't have a stamp from them, then you're not approved and it's not suitable for identity verification for a regulated business. May it be banks, may it be gambling, may it be whatsoever. And so, and these people, they are not recognizing the power of AI as such or the power of technology as such, but they require that there is a certain person on the other hand which makes an ultimate decision. So you are, on the one hand, you have the capabilities of technology to detect fraud in a way which humans maybe cannot, and also in a way that humans can be talked around it. I just bumped my head. And I think what you said about South Africa is a very, very good example, Alex. So, I just bumped my head, or I'm sorry, or no, you're mistaken, or whatsoever, things that will never apply to an AI solution. But on the one hand, the regulation limits itself here for good reasons from an AI compliance perspective and so forth, but still regulation limits itself here to exploit all these technological measures that you would have. And on the other hand, it is very important, I believe, from a product side to understand that all these technical measures that you can apply will be kept secret for the reason of course, business secrets, as well as for the reason of making it harder to actually fraud this specific method. So that's what I think about that.
To kind of segue this into a kind of risk profiling of customers.
I can here only speak about the perspective of mostly online operators, e-commerce operators, online banks, and so forth. And see, video identification is a tool that makes the customer as well as the operator or as well as the offerer endure a little bit. As Max said earlier, there is a time restraint. It's a complicated procedure. It's costly. You need to have it approved and so forth. So usually in the online world, in the dark markets, as per my experience, it is only used as an escalation method. So if you would have someone, you have other approved methods, you would upload in Switzerland and Austria, you can upload, in most of the times, you can just upload your ID card and utility bill, get verified in the first place by this. In Germany, there are other methods which are less invasive and easier and solely technology driven. You upload a scan of your ID card or whatsoever, and then you take it from there. And when then there are inconsistencies about something, for instance, you see someone verifies themselves as T.S. Buschmann, but all of a sudden Max Irwin is depositing into their account. Then you would say, hey, what's going on here? But so if these are all possibilities where basically mostly it's an escalation stage. Yeah. And so when you actually have a really good way and you have it all under control as a fraudster, then maybe you never get detected and you never get to that stage where this can happen. So basically, it is a race between the technology and the abusers of the technology all the time. Yeah. And I think especially the German approach is not up to date yet. I must say this, unfortunately. Yeah.
I don't know, can you gentlemen hear me okay?
Yeah.
Sorry?
Perfect.
It did jump and I lost you slightly, but then I think it's fine now.
Perfect. Yeah. Well, one of the questions I wanted to ask actually was around reviewing kind of risk profiling of customers. And this kind of just came into play with what you've each been saying. If you look at individuals that potentially are more increased likely of being targeted. One of the things that I actually was looking at was around influencers, because obviously they generate high quality, multi-angle facial and voice data, exactly what fraudsters need to build convincing synthetic identities. Are we beginning to see now, with the adoption of video identity, a change in looking at the risk exposed by different types of customers based on their social media activities that could actually make them more likely to come under attack in terms of one of these kind of exploitation activities?
I mean, I believe the idea of this is already there since almost 10 years in terms of PEPs, because one of the reasons why PEPs establish increased risks are not because everyone believes politicians are corrupted, but also because their data and everything is in the public domain, and so they could be easier be targeted. I believe that's one thing. So it is already there. It is just that we are right now, again, we are limiting regulation, we're limiting ourselves. So we are picking a certain group within this group of the likely to be targeted victims here of identity theft or identity abuse, while others, as you correctly say, influencers, media personalities, people who produce high quality content, as per their voice, as per their movements, as per their pictures and so forth, they are completely out of the picture here. And I believe this is a problem, because most of the time, even at least amongst younger generations, these media personalities, celebrities whatsoever, they have much more credibility than a politician would have. Because, I mean, if someone comes around the corner and claims to be Angela Merkel, when they want to open a gambling account with a gambling operator, everybody would be a stranger, would say, well, she's a former chancellor, what's going on, yeah? But if you claim to be some kind of influencer, who maybe the fraud managers at the age of 40 do not even know or aren't even aware of their impact on younger generations, then this would go undetected. And so I believe that's also another big problem. And as I said, I believe that regulation is behind the reality here.
I think,
Alex, you were nodding.
sorry.
Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say on that question, Una, and Thies, you're absolutely correct. But we mustn't underestimate the ability of something like a deepfake LLM to create a very, very convincing likeness of somebody with a very, very small amount of data. So there's I think with something like a 3-minute voice sample, for example, using 11 labs, I can create a 99% accurate clone of your voice. That's just 3 minutes. OpenAI have developed an LLM to do the same thing, and it needs 15 seconds of voice data for a 99% accurate clone. And they haven't released that because they consider it to be too potentially dangerous. But if we think about the amount of data we're creating all the time, I mean, like, you know, if anyone's recording this now and wants to use it for malicious purposes, they've got more than enough content to create a 99% accurate clone. So, you know, people who are prolific on social media, of course, they're putting themselves in you know, a slightly higher risk category, but we can clone pretty much anyone's voice at any time.
And then that actually leads us nicely into a question we've received from Danushka. And one of the questions she's asked here is, you know, balancing deployment and training and expertise. So one of the questions she's asked here, and you can see it on the screen now as well, is how important is it to balance the deployment of technology, in this respect, video identity, and ensuring frontline staff have the expertise and training to manage the associated risks effectively? And Max, this is probably something that you discuss with clients, especially when they're looking for deployment. You know, what are the key characteristics that we're seeing within training and skill set development that are needed?
Yeah, I think there's also another question that comes into this is what often comes to us is also supporting different languages, and also then having the expertise to train those individuals that can support different languages, which is difficult if we're talking about the agents here on the other end of the video call, you know. So there's obviously set regulations that all agent centers need to comply with to be able to train those staff, and also we obviously have certifications that we need for our agents to to have to then be able to offer our services. So there's lots of training that goes into this. Just to also mention, going back to what the guys said, the good thing that we do have now is a lot more intelligence on device fingerprinting, metadata on devices that comes with the video capabilities. So now you can see, you know, where an individual is, their location, their IP, the device they're using, the metadata around that. So you get more insight these days than you probably did with the video technology previously, which allows the agents on the other side to see those different elements. You know, if that person looks like they're in somewhere not in Europe and they're meant to be in, for example, Europe, then ultimately the agents gets insight to that and they can ultimately cancel the call there and then. So there's technology that the agents get on their side that they can use, and then also there is a massive element of, you know, providing staff that have the qualifications, but also, like I said, the ability to translate and also have different languages for all different countries.
Yeah. Well, one of the things, Alex, I'd like to bring you in on this one is, you know, we're looking then kind of with the risks associated and with the skill sets and the training. I was actually at a conference this morning in Amsterdam, and one of the discussions once again was around the fact that our existing controls are based on yesterday's risks, not on the risks that exist in this moment in time, and they're not future proofed. And that's where we're hopefully moving to in a more kind of AI, behavioral analytics, simulated environment. But given the fact that many risk models today still assume kind of linear fraud evolution, how, and in your experience in terms of simulation tests, how often are firms running red team simulations against their onboarding to see whether there's a gap between the model validation and the real world adversarial testing, so to speak?
In my experience, the largest banks, for example, are some of the worst at this. They will wait until they spot a specific modus operandi and then react to it rather than seeking it out, and that all comes down to the mindset of the criminal. And you know, we often hear in large institutions, try and think like a fraudster, try and think like the bad guy, and I'm here to tell you that you know, you just can't, because fraudsters have completely different sets of motivations to everybody else in society, and it's very, very difficult to proactively think, well, hang on, maybe a fraudster is going to try and do this. And the second problem then is not just, okay, you've spotted a new modus operandi. The criminals then have a huge time advantage, because again, with a large institution, you need to spot the modus operandi, then work out how they're doing it, then think, right, well, how can we combat that? Then we try and code something, to try and design something to stop it, test it, get permission to roll it out across the estate. This can take months, and it just shows that the real, you know, time advantage that you know, not the sort of random, you know, low level fraudsters that Tees you mentioned might try and open a gambling account and, you know, with their grandmother's credit card, but you know, the serious organized crime nation state actors are just on a completely different level. They also, we've seen recently the level of patience that the criminal outfits will have. I'm thinking in particular of the Bybit hack, where the malware was embedded into the Bybit servers a whole 6 months before the attack was then deployed by the Lazarus group. So 6 months of just sitting, you know, and you think of fraudsters rushing and being keen to just smash the door down and grab the money and run off, but they've got patience, and they'll sit there in the shadows for months and months and months if needed. So yeah, I don't know what the answer is. The answer is never to be surprised. As soon as you spot a new MO, you need to move as quickly as you can. You need to, you know, have no barriers to testing, no barriers to deployment. I'm speaking to the converted, I know, Una.
No, I know, and that requires an entire cultural and mind shift transformation. And maybe I could bring you in on that. You know, one of the things Alex is saying there, and when I'm reading between the lines, is it's about trust. the biggest shift that we're seeing isn't that fraudsters are faking faces. It's now that they're simulating trust. Our current mode of operation is when we see a person, we believe it. What we need to do is prove it's a reality. And can you maybe, and I don't know if you have kind of much, but can you maybe speak to that with using video identity in day-to-day practices as a practitioner? What are the challenges there from moving from, well, yes, that's a person, I can see it, to actually, is it a real person? Like, so what are we looking at biometric kind of key data, etc.? How are organizations going to defend the technology when questioned by regulators or indeed law enforcement, should there be a future enforcement event?
Yeah, I think, well, there obviously, we provide a lot of, audit trails on our reports on, what happened in the process. There's also, like, depending on the regulation, there's different steps that have to be reported to then provide for the audits. But to take it back a step, I mean, it's about a layered approach. So this video ident ultimately won't be the kind of only defense that banks or gaming companies, whatever we're talking about, will be using. I mentioned kind of device intelligence and fingerprint technology on devices in this day and age. But yeah, you have all of those stuff at registration forms that can help and combat the kind of attacks that the guys mentioned. But then also on top of that, you then have biometrics, where you might have, when you open your account or an account that you want to go and change your details, you'll have to do a biometric check in the flow. And then ultimately video ident might be the next fallback to that for, what we said, VIPs or, high spend accounts. So there's lots of different elements and products that can be used and layered to ultimately combat all of the things that the guys mentioned. Previously, when video ident was probably used in the past, you didn't have the luxury of all these multiple products that you do now, and singly doing a biometric on its own and linking that back to a video ident that might have happened previously. That's also an advantage this day and age, which I think banks are using more and more, is behavioral capture on its own to do a one-to-one comparison to the face that we've captured in a video ident previously. So that is used a lot for account takeover, which to combat account takeover, which is becoming more and more of a problem, I guess, across industries. So yeah, there's some of the things that I guess help. And yeah, there's multiple products that I could probably go on to try and talk about that help with this kind of stuff now.
Yeah. And I think it's worth to say as well that there are scenarios where video identity may just add friction without meaningful uplift, so to speak, in terms of risk mitigation, such as, for example, where we do have mature digital identity ecosystems, video identity may just duplicate existing assurance levels, or indeed kind of low risk retail products. But one of the things obviously we spoke about earlier was where video identity will materially reduce risk. And obviously we talked about PEPs, we talked about influencers. Can we talk a little bit about cross-border customers as well? I don't know, Max or Thies, if you want to pick this one up. The added value that gives in terms of visual confirmation and behavioral cues goes far beyond documentation checks. Is that where you see it really adding value? Or rather, is it more on the product side with kind of crypto on-ramps, investment, custody accounts, kind of beneficial ownership verification?
Yeah, I think one of the most effective ways also, because there is still a market for video ident, even if it's not that you have to use it for regulation. We see it sometimes used alongside other verification methods. So you can give the option, you have orchestration tools now whereby a customer will go online and they will be offered 3 different verification methods, and they ultimately opt into the one they want to use. And that can include things like bank account verification and stuff like that in this day and age. So, and we also have things like automatic document capture, and then the add-on of QES, so electronic signature, and then also things like penny drop, where you drop a penny into your account as well to verify that that's legitimate as well. So there's all these some of those can replace VideoIdent, but also be used alongside each other. And then, you know, you still have a market in especially Germany, whereby the older generation will be used to this VideoIdent for most of their life, and that's what they want to use, so they're opt into it, so it can be used alongside each other. Yeah, I don't know, Tiers, do you have any kind of other experience in where it's kind of used?
Well, I must say I'm still chewing a little bit on what you said about the patience and the effort that fraudsters take and about their mindset, because I think that's perfectly right, because I believe what we are having right now, it is, of course, there is one approach when you are an online operator, especially when you're a gambling operator or an e-commerce operator or so. One approach is to tackle identity theft or identity fraud at the stage of identity, and another one is to make it more complicated to actually get the money in or out. Yeah, so this is another stage, but that's on another thing. But on this is basically how it works, and especially under the, let me say, economic pressure that you are as an operator, or we either you operate an online shop, or you have some kind of financial service, or you have a gambling website or whatsoever. Still, you want to get the customers in. You can't make it too difficult for them, because otherwise you lose them and someone else is there and makes it easier. And so I believe that actually the solutions that we are having right now, they are only designed, are only suitable to actually detect petty fraudsters, while the real bad actors, yeah, the guys who develop new stuff, who have possibilities, who are spending money on it, who have patience, who buy expertise, these can, by the solutions we're having right now, they can reasonably not be detected. You can only clear this up in the rear view. And then there is another thing that I would like to say heartfelt here as an MRO for several companies. And then there is a problem that very often, even when you report cases where you just see something's odd, you cannot get your head around it, what is actually happening, but you see something's not as it should be, then it is depending on the jurisdiction, but it's very, very rare that actually AML authorities act upon that, or act upon that in a way that you can benefit and that you can basically, you can improve your lines of security. So I believe that's also, yes?
I actually got asked this question in a meeting recently about, once we submit a SAR or an STR to the authorities, how should we wait in terms of their response? And my response was, well, why are you waiting? What are you waiting for? If you have identified an irregularity on account that concerns you sufficiently to submit a SAR and STR, your obligation from a regulatory perspective is to take appropriate internal actions. And I get the challenges around that, etc. But I think the previous misconception was when you submit a SAR and STR, it then becomes a waiting game of a response. In my opinion, it is, you've identified a risk which you feel is adequate enough to be raised to the FIU. I'm more concerned now about the risk exposure and the accountability that I have in my book as a result of that. So I always go defend against that argument. If you've seen an irregularity, you should be asking yourself, okay, are we as an organization comfortable to continue with this account based on what we've seen, irrespective of what the FIU tell us, or not tell us in many instances?
Yeah, sure. See, it is, I agree perfectly with what you say, but there is also another question, which one cannot forget, which is the risk of typing off. So it is, depending on the jurisdiction you're in and your internal procedures, it is that once you have submitted an STR to the authority, there can be instances where you cannot touch this account anymore for the sake of avoiding a typing off. So this means you have to be also very precise and very dedicated internal procedures to make sure that you effectively combat fraud or money laundering or terrorist funding or whatever may be in there, but on the other hand, abide by your reporting obligation, and so that you are not limiting yourself one way or the other. And I believe that is, depending on the jurisdictions, it's a major problem, because some authorities in some countries are quite fierce about prosecuting typing offs, or what they understand to be typing offs. So, for instance, if you are reporting something and afterwards you may be blocking an account, this may be seen as a typing off by certain authorities or by certain courts even. So it is that you have to instigate internal proceedings, limit the possibilities to efficiently get abused. Yeah, so you have to do these steps before you actually can file a report, because the authorities may be so, let me say, so slow, or maybe so non-responsive, that otherwise you actually know or you feel that something's going on, but you can't touch it anymore. Yeah.
This is where I will agree to disagree. In my personal experience, I have never come across a blanket rule requiring a firm to keep an account open purely because a SAR has been filed. Rather, it's more nuanced on balancing reporting obligations, as you mentioned, tipping off prohibitions, and also your own risk appetite. And there are ways in which to close the account without tipping off the client, you know, based on your own risk appetite, etc. So I'm going to play devil's advocate here, because I'm not saying that it's not the case, but I've never come across that. And actually, as an MLRO with individual accountability, if that was the case in a jurisdiction that I operated within, I would think twice about accepting an MLRO role post, because that directly places accountability on my doorstep when I can't do anything with an account that has been identified as having kind of, should I say, risk indicators, and I can't manage any risk around it. So again, I will be.
So as I said, I'm not saying it's not possible, but you need to have clear, dedicated procedures to avoid it, because otherwise, if you are just this again, I believe we are getting a little bit off track from the topic of the discussion, but still, I think it is, you need to make sure that that these two things can walk in hand: reporting obligations, efficiently combating fraud, protecting your business, protecting your customers. So, and if you don't plan this the right way, then you may end up in a situation as you described, and you're perfectly right that it's one's own personal decision to accept a position with personal liability when you act in a jurisdiction or in a legal environment where you can face these things. That's perfectly right.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things I actually, it was a quote that I heard recently, which I really loved, and apologies, I'm not remembering the individual, but it's actually talking about where we roll out various controls, because we know that they are powerful and they're good. And the quote was, used everywhere, it becomes theater. Used intelligently, it becomes assurance. And I think that in respect of video identity, that is exactly. So that then kind of brings us nicely, if I may, over to you, Max, on the question around that we discussed before around DORA. And the challenges that we potentially will have in respect of, you know, regulatory application, information that we have in customers, storage of that information, transmission of that information. How should firms treat third-party providers that are providing video identity within third-party risk and DORA frameworks? Should they be classified as critical functions? And what level of testing and contingency planning should be expected?
Yeah, I think on the kind of assessment and auditing, I guess, on your providers, you should basically, I guess, be doing kind of audit reviews and tests on a percentage of your customers that you're onboarded every kind of 3 months, whereby you're testing the 3 elements that comply with that set regulation. There might be 3 parts within the video ident framework that is required, and ultimately you should make sure that all 3 of those are ticked off during the process, whether that's set questions or that's making sure that they're doing a hologram check during the process, or that it includes things like biometrics or whatever it might be. It's just making sure you're doing some sort of audit during the process, and making sure that your supplier meets all those requirements of the framework, to be honest.
Brilliant, thank you. And Stacey, if I may just ask to you, actually, in your experience, is this becoming commonplace in the market? And is there particular sectors, for example, within financial services, that we're seeing this, the uptake faster and quicker? For example, I don't know, fintechs, iGaming, crypto platforms?
I am not really, you were a little bit interrupted for me. Can you please repeat the question?
Sorry, is it working now?
Yes, yes.
Yep. My question is there specific kind of within financial services, are we seeing specific types of entities such as fintechs, crypto firm, iGaming, which are actually taking up video identity at a faster pace than maybe some other TradeFi comparisons?
Well, I am seeing, as I said earlier, I believe as an escalation method, almost every regulated business in the online world, may it be fintechs, or may it be gambling operators, or may it be regulated crypto exchange platforms, would have some kind of solution, which is a video ident solution of some sort. Yeah, I believe so. And if it would be, some are regulated and some are provided by external companies like Shufti or ID Now or so. Some have own procedures where someone just calls you and does something, yeah. But I would say that, I mean, this is technology driven, and I would say that the businesses or the business areas which are technology driven too, they are faster in picking that up than others. While I personally believe that video ident is still a very, very conservative approach. It's basically replacing the idea is to replace a verification procedure as it would happen at the cashier. You go somewhere, you show your ID card, whatsoever, and this is basically what it is. But still, I would say that as an escalation method, as I said, there are frictions in terms of the way to customer and the customer experience when you use this as a large scale. But as an escalation method, definitely the technology-driven branches, especially these, as I said, fintechs, gambling operators, certain types of e-commerce service providers, crypto exchange platforms, and so forth, they definitely use it, and I would say it is good, as per my views.
Perfect. Thank you very much. And Max, then to you, obviously rolling out these tools into the market, where have you seen the key challenges in kind of implementation and adoption? And is there key data cleanup exercises that need to be conducted? Documentation from clients? Is there any kind of, or is it potentially tech compatibility with codes? Where are the main challenges in adoption, if any at all?
I think adoption now drives back a lot of the time to cost, because it is significantly high cost compared to some of the other available identity methods in the market, like your QES options now. So a lot of it kind of drives back to that, but there's still the option that people want to have this alongside things like QES in the DACH region. There's regions out, there's obviously markets outside of banking and gaming in DACH region that use this. We mentioned South Africa and Philippines and other markets like this, but a lot of the time it drives back now to the fact that it's heavy costs and also the time that it takes to actually verify someone in the process and the steps. Whereas an automated approach might onboard someone in a minute, 2 minutes. This might take more like 3 minutes, 4 minutes. But like I said before, it's about kind of either rolling this out on certain thresholds or certain VIP customers or certain risk appetites that you might have for certain customers, and then also the ability to do it alongside other verification methods that suit your customers, basically.
Absolutely. So coming up to kind of the last kind of 10 minutes here, and again, as I mentioned, questions please from the audience if you have any further questions. I don't want to kind of, we talked about where video identity can add value and where it actually can increase friction. Let's just talk a little bit more then about the fraud landscape before we jump into kind of the next 3 to 5 years. We've talked about regulators, we've talked about adoption. Thish, you made a comment earlier about kind of regulatory adoption sometimes kind of being counter to the speed at which we're able to make change happen. where would you proactively see regulatory change happening that would better support us with increasing the positive attributes and capabilities of video identity?
Where you mean as in jurisdictions, or you mean as in branches, or
jurisdiction? Examples of regulatory challenges where that kind of has gone counter to the positive impact that having this in place could make, and that slows down adoption, that slows down the speed of change.
Well, I must say I am seeing the best, I think always the best example for slowing developments down is, I'm sorry to say, that is Germany. Yeah, because in Germany it is that, as I said, Germany has a very, very specific approach towards online identity verification methods. They don't allow what everyone else allows, but they're very specific ideas, and the aim is a very good one. But still it is the way how actually changes are adopted, new topologies are adopted. It is all going, let me say, in a very, very slow way. Yeah. Then also the space that you can act in as a provider of ID services is a very, very small one. And there are there are just a lot of limitations. And so it is that once you are, it is the same problem like with the modus operandi as Alex said before. So for instance, you have a state-of-the-art technology and you are engaging to develop this technology. And then you are engaging to get it approved. And so, and once you get the approval and you can roll it out and you can sell it to the clients, there may be 1 year or 1.5 years or maybe even 2 years down the line, and technology is even much farther already. And if you then want to adjust this technology and like want to bring it up to speed to the things happening right now, then you are again in a situation that you may need new approvals, changes to your license that you're holding, and so forth. And so you get stopped a little bit by that. And that is actually a sad thing, I find. Yeah. But so this is, I must say, I think this is, I know they are trying to do a good job, yeah, but they are just not fast and not flexible enough.
Yeah. Well, I actually heard, and Alex, maybe you can step in on this one. I've heard some, this is more to do with kind of facial recognition, but I'd heard of some, frauds in the UK where mobile phones have been stolen, where the person's walking down the street, so the phone is open, and the fraudster has then immediately, or the criminal who stole the phone, then changes the facial recognition on the phone to their face, and their banking platform didn't require re-verification if that actually happened. So they were immediately able to open up the banking platforms on the banking apps on the phone of the individual and basically drain the bank accounts before the individual even had a chance to get to the police station.
Yeah, that's right. So the problem there, and this fraud often happens through Apple Pay, which is that when you get a new phone, or if you change your Face ID, or you set up your phone again and you change it with a new photograph of your face, Apple doesn't check that the new photograph relates in any way to your old photograph. So if I get a new phone now, and then upload all my bank accounts to my phone and have to record my face, you take a view of your face, different angles and so on. It doesn't check it. It just links that face at that time to that phone. So then I can authorize any payment using Apple Pay, and the bank has no knowledge. It just has a confirmation from Apple Pay that, yeah, it's authorized by Face ID, but it doesn't check if that Face ID is the same face as the other phone. That strikes me as a major weakness with Apple Pay in particular. I know that banks, with banking applications, they, if you're applying to take out an account or a product, they'll do things differently within the banking app, which is applauded. But Apple Pay seems to let it all down, and that's how that particular fraud that you referred to is perpetrated.
Yeah, and I think that's the kind of the as you mentioned earlier, this speed that frauds are evolving. If we're still looking through yesterday's lens at how we mitigate risk, and we're not thinking about evolving shifts, very quickly these typologies will begin to occur, and then the banks then obviously then changes will be made. But the amazing thing with modern day financial scams is that they're evolving at a space of innovation that we've never seen before in the industry in respect of the evolution of financial crime. And indeed, the modern financial crimes are no longer singular, or should I say linear. They're not money laundering or cybersecurity or data protection issues or ABC. They're basically a melting pot.
They're hybrid. They're hybrid now.
Correct.
Yeah.
And there's the challenge with siloed risk functions within organizations, which criminals are taking advantage of because we don't share data and our systems are so fragmented and detached from one another that we actually don't, they see a better full picture than we do in many instances of the actual opportunities for them on the accounts.
Fraudsters are amazing at sharing data. If only industry was as good as sharing data as fraudsters are. I'm aware of some banking frauds which I perpetrated, where the money was, I think the victim was Barclays, and it was moving to a Lloyd's account. The banks spoke to each other and said, "Yeah, we have a fraud in progress. We need all the data relating to that account immediately." And they were like, "Yeah, we can get it to you within 24 hours." The money had moved to Dubai within 30 minutes. Yeah. So it's completely unfit for purpose.
Absolutely. So that brings us now, we've got 4 minutes left. So that kind of brings us to the future role of video identity. So, as video identity wallets, AI verification, and regulatory frameworks evolve, what role will video identity play, if any, in the next 3 to 5 years, in particular with significant increase in digital identity? And maybe, Max, we could start with you.
Yeah, I'm sure in 10 years, we'll probably be talking about how fraudsters have managed to hack people's digital identities. But I like to think that digital identity will be the answer to it all. But yeah, I think digital identity will bring a lot more secure and quicker verification methods. So, less of, I guess, video ident verification methods where we're talking about 5 minutes. We're talking, even quicker than a document capture now. It will be someone entering pins and verifying themselves within 10 seconds, and that will be secure within their phones or secure wallets. So yeah, I think that's the future. Whether it will bring a totally secure place for the identity world and secure onboarding, it's yet to sort of see, really. The rollout of this will happen between now and obviously 2030, I imagine, and then we'll be able to sort of, I guess, have further webinars like this to identify how we can keep up to date with it. But the identity wallet is the main one, and obviously we have countries across the globe that are already way ahead of us in the UK, like the UAE Pass that's being rolled out, the Emirates ID significantly, and they've seen real good success with that across many different use cases. So yeah, I think that is the future, and then that alongside biometric verification that we're seeing now is getting quicker and quicker. It's not someone turning of their head, it's someone just holding it still on their face for milliseconds. So yeah, them two combined is the future of onboarding. Also with the metadata that I mentioned and device intelligence that we're getting more and more of as we go. Those three combined are probably the future of secure onboarding. We're running out of time, so sorry, that's me.
No. It's actually, we've got a minute or so left. So if I may, so Alex, any final words from you?
Yeah, I think to support Max, what you just said, it's about blending tech, isn't it? It's not just about relying on one thing. It's about blending, thinking about device intelligence. I've come across some really fascinating stuff recently where banks can now detect the angle at which somebody is holding their phone whilst keying in a payment. And if that angle is substantially different to the last 500 payments that person's keyed in, they'll block the transaction. So that could indicate that somebody's being coached into making a payment, and that is very, very helpful. There's light at the end of the tunnel. I don't want everyone to feel doom and gloom after this podcast. But yeah, and there's lots of clever people, people like Tees and Max and yourself doing incredible work. So I think we can all be optimistic.
And last but not least, these.
I guess these were very nice words from Max and from Alex and from you, and so I don't think I have anything else to add. And Maybe one sentence, I believe also, as much as the reply to the question if VideoIdent will evolve, I believe as much as fraudsters go hybrid, as we said before, also the technology to combat fraud and to fulfill regulatory obligations must go hybrid. And I believe that's the way forward.
Thank you very much for that. So I'd also like to take a moment to thank John Christmas, Gray, and Fabio Didio for their comments in the chat room. I tried to incorporate those into some of the questions. So the key takeaway today is that video identity should not be treated as a static solution, but as a control that must continuously adapt to risk, technology, and regulatory change. Thank you, therefore, to our panelists for the thoughtful insights. Max, Alex, and Thies, thank you very much. And to everyone who's joined us today, we really hope that this discussion has proved practical and given you new perspectives that you can take away into your own onboarding and risk frameworks. So on that note, a massive thank you to Shufti Pro for putting on this webinar today, and I hope you have a wonderful weekend ahead.
Thanks, Una. Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.